Okay, right there. Ever since I was a little kid, I've always wanted to travel.
All right. La estrella de cine va.
Ashley, say hi.
I decided that I wanted to collect experiences and memories. I wanted to see what was out there. Since I was little, I always kind of felt that there's more than one way to live, more than one way to experience life. And somehow, as I got older, as I lived my life, decisions I made allowed me to completely live out that dream. And now that I am 30, I'm kind of at this lookout point in my life. But I'm looking at all of the experiences, all of the people, places I've lived, the places I've traveled to, and realize how much they are ingrained in me, how much they've taught me, and the lessons I've learned through travel, and also as a consequence of travel. I wanted to share some of those lessons with some of the travel experiences that I've lived. You get to fulfill your dreams, but sometimes they don't always look the way you thought they would look. There's this one scene at the end of the movie Under the Tuscan Sun where the main character is with her realtor friend, and he says to her, "Look, you got everything you've ever wanted." And she kind of looks perplexed. She realizes that she got everything she wanted when he starts pointing out. He says, "You wanted love in your home. There's a wedding, there's love. You wanted a family." He points to her best friend who's holding her baby. And she has this moment of realization where she realized that everything she said she wanted, she got at the end. It just didn't look the way she thought it was going to look. And I think that's something that I have learned throughout my life in my 20s, is that I had dreams of living abroad and traveling, and I got to live abroad in Chile, which I never thought I was going to do. And then I got my dream of living in Spain when I lived in Barcelona last year. In that particular trip, I felt a lot of guilt because I finally got the thing I wanted, but it didn't look like how I thought it was going to happen. It didn't feel like how I thought it was going to happen. And there came a point in that experience where I realized this scene, I remembered this scene, and I was like, I got everything I ever wanted. It just didn't look how I pictured it at the time. And that's okay. And it's important to remember to be present, to accept the experience as is if you can't change it, to enjoy the experience as much as you can, and remember that you get your dreams. They just might not look always exactly how you picture them. You will not find yourself through traveling. When I was 23, 24, I went on my first big solo trip to Bali. And on the last leg of that trip, I was in Singapore. I was sitting near my hostel and I was eating my McDonald's because it's a very expensive city and I could only afford a $7 McDonald's meal. And they have vegetarian options there, which is really nice. And I'm listening to Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles. And all of a sudden, I had this thought that just kind of invaded my mind. It did not work. And I had realized that I had used this trip, and I think many of us, when we're probably really young, tend to do this where we don't know who we are, so we want to go find ourselves out there. And we go on these trips, these big trips, to find solutions, to have the answers to our problems, to discover who we are, if you will, through these trips. And in this moment, I realized that it didn't work. I still felt as lost as I've ever did. I still was confused. And it didn't give me the answer I was looking for. And in that moment, I internalized that so much that any trip that I took from that point on, I never went with the intention of finding myself. And what travel does give you is perspective. It's okay to change. It's okay to want different things. A couple of years ago, I went to Dublin to visit my friend. I've always been someone who's loved every aspect of traveling. Even though packing is my least favorite part, I still enjoy it. I actually love going to the airport. Fun fact, I wrote a creative paper in 11th grade about airports and their significance and why I love them so much. In this trip, as I was preparing, something fell off. I loved seeing my friend, but something mentally, emotionally was not correct. I kept getting this feeling of like, I should be excited about this. Like, I love to travel. Why do I hate it? And that's the feeling I kept having. I hate the very thing that I used to love. And that was very alarming because if your whole identity is wrapped up to this thing that is traveling and being the traveler amongst your friends, amongst your family, and then the very thing everyone knows you for is the thing that you least identify with, there could be some struggle there, and I definitely experienced that. I realized that it is okay to change. It is okay to want different things. You know, your 20s are for you to try on different outfits. They always have this analogy that I love, that it's like a dressing room. And your 20s are for that. It's okay if you don't identify with the identity, the persona that you cultivated at one point in your life. You live experiences, you travel, and you change. There are things that you need to give up in order for change. I was on this train ride from Napoli to Roma. I had this thought with more of a question that came to mind that was, what do you need to give up in order to be the person you want to be? And that's a scary question because it requires you to be extremely honest with yourself. So I took out my journal and I wrote all of the things I need to change in order to be the person. But more than that, what are the things I need to give up? And these things can be anything from resentment, regret, a lack mindset, people, relationships, friendships, dreams that you once had, old versions of yourself. It could be so many different things. But I learned that two things sometimes can't exist. You can't be the old version of yourself and all of that comes with it, and want to be this type of person and achieve these things and work towards these things by still holding on to the very thing that got you to the place that you're in. And something that I've realized and learned, that when it comes to change, the hardest thing about recognizing that and letting that go is realizing that the versions of yourself, who you were, are the hardest thing to let go of. You can't love anything or anyone more than you love yourself. When I was living in Chile, I was in a situationship. Honestly, at this point, I really don't know what to call it. But what I do know is that I was really in love. This isn't bashing the other person, because I have still a lot of cariño, as you would say in Spanish, for that other person. That relationship was what I consider a consequential relationship. And I think our lives are made up of consequential relationships, friendships, experiences. And that for me was one where I clearly knew that there was a person before that relationship and there was a version of me after that relationship. I learned that I had loved the other person more than I loved myself, that I respected the other person's feelings more than my own feelings. And I quiet those things down in the sake of this relationship. And it was nothing bad or negative or anything like that. It was just, you know, a woman navigating life. I learned I can't love anything more or anyone more than I love myself. That relationship was also consequential because it made me, for the first time, question the way I was living my life. And not in a negative way, but in a way that I was experiencing things that I never had entertained in my life, that I never really thought I wanted necessarily. For a very long time, my mentality was travel, live abroad, these experiences. There was no room for anything else. It was very consequential in that sense because it fundamentally changed what I value and who I am at my core to a certain extent. If it wasn't because of that relationship, I would never have entertained certain things that now I factor into the equation when it comes to my life. You are your best travel buddy. The self-love journey is the lesson, the journey, the trip that I am the most proud of, and probably the one that I will tear up a little bit because it's the one that I worked the hardest for and fought for, even when I didn't know I was fighting for. And this isn't one particular experience or travel, it is every single one that I've ever taken. The relationship that you have with yourself will be the longest relationship that you ever have. So it is the one that needs to be the strongest. People will come and go in your life, but the one thing that is constant and that will always remain is the relationship that you have with yourself. So nurture that relationship, love that relationship, get to know who you are and how you change, give yourself the space to be all of the things, love yourself more than you love anything else, respect yourself, know your worth, know that you're deserving of everything that you want or dream of in your life. Don't be so good at the big stuff that you forget to be good at the small stuff. Adventure, although I'm not like maybe your traditional adventure seeker, I've always loved to travel, and that within my family and in my spaces was pretty adventurous. And throughout my 20s, throughout my life, I found opportunities and dedicated my life to finding those opportunities to move abroad, to experience what that was like, to travel. And somewhere along the way, through my experiences of living abroad and traveling, particularly the main ones, which would be Barcelona and Chile, in conversations with friends, I had realized that I became so good at the big stuff, like moving abroad. If you would have told me move to Timbuktu and build a life and figure it out, I could do it. In a heartbeat, I would figure out a way, I would figure out the language, the bureaucracy systems, I would get it done. But I found myself being so good at those things that I forgot how to be good at the small things, like going on Bumble and saying hi to somebody and going on dates, because I'm always leaving. How to have a routine, a morning routine, an exercise routine. And I forgot how to enjoy those small things because I was so focused on the big experiences. And life is about balance. Life is about having both of those things. Adventure can mean different things for different people. Adventure for you can change throughout time. It can mean very different things. Adventure does still mean wanting to go to Vietnam and maybe spend a month there. But adventure also for me means, because of that consequential relationship, waking up on a Sunday morning with someone you love and they bring you coffee and you make breakfast together. That is also adventure. And so it's important to have balance in your life. Don't go chasing the excitement and the adventure all the time. There needs to be balance. The road, you can replace that with life. The journey, whatever you like, can be very long sometimes. You will come into contact with many different people. There will be different characters in your life. You will be very different characters. But if you follow your heart and you stay true to that voice, that feeling, that thing inside of you, of whatever it is that you want to do, if you are open enough to the people that you meet, if you're open enough to the experiences that you have, you will change. The key with that is that when that change starts happening, to sit, to marinate in how you're changing. Leave what doesn't work, accept what does, and keep going on the road.
To you, happy birthday.